Hi everyone, I'm Law of the West. Welcome to my buyer's guide for the C1, A1, and the L1 Spirit, which are the new concept ships from Crusader Industries. Concept ships can be a tricky investment, and I know that a lot of people are still on the fence when it comes to getting one of these ships. So I hope to provide you with all the information that I can so that you can make the most informed decision as possible as to whether or not the Spirit is the type of ship that you'd be interested in. So what kind of ship is the Spirit? It was meant to be Crusader's attempt to create a competitor for other medium-sized ships like the Freelancer and the Cutlass. Its intention was to be something that people would naturally look into getting if they wanted to make the transition from owning a small ship and move on to something that was more medium-sized. It's the perfect fit for someone who wants to gain the benefits that comes along with having a vessel that's been outfitted with medium-sized components while only having to rely on a small crew of people to run it. And medium-sized ships are also great for people who like to fly solo, but also occasionally find themselves playing with a group of friends. Now, as I said before, there's 3 variants in the Spirit lineup, and each of them are specialized for performing a specific role. Like, for instance, the C1 has a focus on cargo hauling and small vehicle transportation. It has a large ramp that leads directly into the back of the ship and is currently listed as being able to carry 48 SCUs of cargo. So far, they've only confirmed that a Cyclone could fit into it, which means that by extension, all the other smaller vehicles should also fit, including all of the Gravlevs, the Ranger, the PTV Buggy, the Mule, the STV, and the G12s. And this room is going to be big enough so that if you did park any of these vehicles in it, you'd still have room left over for carrying at least some cargo. But there was no mention as to whether or not a rover could fit into it. And I'm hoping that they'll clarify this in the upcoming Q&A, which I'll pin that information into a comment for this video if they do. One of the other things that's unique to the C1 is that instead of having guns, its rear-facing turret has a utility hardpoint and a tractor beam mounted onto it. And you can just imagine how handy this is going to end up being when you're loading cargo. I'm also hoping you'll be able to use it to tow vehicles and perhaps even yoink all kinds of things off the ground while you're flying past them. The A1 is the bomber version of the Spirit. The unique thing about the A1 is that in addition to the normal payload of missiles that it and the other Spirits have, the A1 comes with 10 additional sci-fi bombs. These bombs are gravity fed and held internally within 2 rows of 5 individual tubes that flank a walkway that runs along the center of the ship. The A1 could easily be looked at as a smaller version of the A2, but because of its size, the A1 is going to go about doing its intended role a bit differently than the A2 does. This is because its bombs are half the size of the A2's MOABs, but it's got more of them. And it's not going to have the alternative size 3 carpet bombing options that the A2 could be outfitted with. Instead, the Spirit is going to have to be more precise when picking its targets, and it's going to have to rely on its better maneuverability and greater speed to avoid being hit during a bombing run. The E1 was described as being a much smaller version of the Starliner, but with a lot more of an emphasis on comfort as opposed to being a bulk transport like the Genesis is supposed to be. The thing that's really unique about the E1 is how its interior is structured. Its inner module has been split into 2 levels. The top level of the cabin is connected to the lower deck via 2 elevators, and it houses within it a series of 6 individual pods that can comfortably accommodate 1 passenger each. Each one of these pods has a storage locker, a widescreen monitor, private facilities, window seating, and a large glass roof, which is yet another thing that's distinctly unique to this variant. The E1 is an interesting addition to Star Citizen, because so far up until now, the only competition that Origin's extensive lineup of luxury craft had was the RSI Phoenix. And it's refreshing to see a new luxury ship that was built by someone other than Origin. There's one other thing about these variants that can be different, and it's that their hardpoints may be the same, but their weapon loadouts can differ from ship to ship. Like for instance, some of the variants have swapped out the nose turret for a fixed weapon. The C1 has a utility mount on its rear turret instead of guns, and the A1 can carry 10 bombs in addition to its standard missile loadout. Although these variants have been specialized in a number of ways, they still have a lot of things in common. Like for instance, they're all based on the same chassis, so they're all going to have the same basic dimensions. It's only going to be the rear section of the ship and its core that's going to change from variant to variant. And they all have the same number of components, which are all medium-sized. They also all have a size 3 weapon hardpoint on the nose, 2 more size 3 hardpoints on the wings, and a rear-facing turret. They also all have 2 customizable size 4 missile racks. And the forward section of all the Spirits have the same look when it comes to its flight deck. The pilot and co-pilot seats are situated side by side in a way that's very similar looking to the setup that the MSR has. And just behind the bridge is the living section for the crew. It has 2 beds, each of which have been recessed into the walls, It also has a set of storage lockers and a series of cabinets that are used to house most of the ship's components. There's also a section of the ship that's located between two bulkheads that seems to have a standard bathroom in it and possibly a small food station. And some people have theorized that there's also a docking collar here and/or a secondary way to exit the ship. Although I can't find any evidence to support this, not from this picture or from any of the concept artwork that I've seen for the Spirit. And once again, I hope that this is something that the Q&A will address. And I'll make sure to pin that in a comment along with any other new information that they end up giving about this ship. So what was the Spirit meant to be a competitor for? It was intended to exist within the same strata as other ships like the Cutlass and the Freelancer. It was also meant to do a lot of the same things that those other ships are capable of doing. And after they announced that, the first thing I did was to immediately do a side-by-side comparison with them to see how their technical specs matched up against one another. They seem to have done a good job at making the C1 fall right down the middle when it comes to the standard Freelancer and the Cuddy Black. But it differentiates itself by having a lot better maneuverability and being noticeably faster than they are. I found that the A1 is a lot more of a standalone ship that really doesn't compare to anything else right now, and it's best to look at as being a smaller version of the A2. It's going to definitely appeal to people who like the A2 but don't like the idea of having to run a lot bigger and a much more expensive ship in order to go on bombing runs. The E1 also doesn't seem to be as much a competitor as it is something that fits into the already existing lineup of luxury ships that focus on VIP transportation. It's Crusader's first attempt at throwing their hat into the luxury transport ring. And you know if there's already a C2, an M2, and an A2, then at some point in the future there's also going to be an E2. But for now, the E1 is a great alternative to have for people who want something that's small but still dedicated to passenger transport and luxury, and may not want to fully commit to owning something as large as a Phoenix, a touring version of the 600i, or an 890 Jump. Another thing that the Spirit lineup has over any competitor is its insanely powerful VTOL thrusters. They're built just like the ones that you'd find on a Starlifter, which have the best thrust-to-weight ratio when compared to any other large ship in the game. So in addition to its fast speed and maneuverability, it should also be able to take off like a rocket and be able to stabilize its flight path even when traveling through some of the worst types of weather. Well, that's going to be it for my buyer's guide on the Spirit and all of its variants. I've been your host, Law of the West. Thanks for watching, and take care.